At 38 years old, Jamari felt he had earned this morning. His salary as a senior epidemiologist at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta was a respectable $132,000 a year, the result of a decade of relentless work, of chasing pathogens on paper and in the field. He had earned the quiet. He had earned the light filtering through the mature oak trees of Ansley Park, dappling the hardwood floors of the house he now owned. The closing had been on Wednesday, a blur of signatures and legal documents that transferred a $1.8 million historical property into his name, and his name alone, secured within a trust he'd established long before he'd even met his wife, Kiara. He'd spent the last 2 days in a state of quiet bliss, moving in the few boxes he'd brought from their shared apartment, sleeping on an air mattress in the master bedroom, dreaming of the life they would build here. The devastating situation arrived at 8:17 a.m. on Saturday morning, not with a bang, but with the diesel groan of a 26-foot U-Haul truck, its side emblazoned with a $43,000 price tag for the vehicle itself, though this one was just a rental. It lumbered down his pristine, quiet street and hissed to a stop directly in front of his walkway. Jamari, holding a $4 cup of coffee he'd brewed himself from beans he'd ground just moments before, stood at the large bay window, his heart beginning a slow, heavy drum against his ribs. He didn't understand. He'd planned to move the big furniture next weekend, with professional movers. He'd told Kiara this. Behind the U-Haul, his father-in-law's beat-up 2008 Honda Accord, worth maybe $3,000 on a good day, pulled up and parked crookedly. Doors opened. Out poured Kiara's family. Winston, his father-in-law, a man of few words and even fewer opinions, stretched his back. Malachi, Kiara's perpetually unemployed 26-year-old brother, hopped out with the restless energy of someone who'd been promised a reward. And then there was Cordelia, his mother-in-law, a formidable woman who moved with the unshakable certainty of a battleship. She was already directing traffic, pointing at the house. Kiara was the last to emerge from the passenger side of the truck, a triumphant proprietary smile on her face. It was the smile of a general surveying conquered territory. Jamari felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This was not a surprise visit. This was an invasion. He set his coffee mug down on a cardboard box labeled Medical Journals and walked to the front door, his mind racing, trying to assemble the pieces of a puzzle he hadn't even known existed. He opened the heavy oak door just as Cordelia, flanked by her family, ascended the 3 short steps to his porch. She didn't smile. She didn't say hello. She simply surveyed the grand entrance, the manicured boxwoods, the gleaming brass knocker, and then fixed her gaze on him. Her voice, laced with an unnerving mix of condescension and excitement, cut through the humid Atlanta air. "Well, don't just stand there, Jamari," she said, gesturing with a dismissive flick of her wrist toward the U-Haul. "Help your brother-in-law with the boxes." She took a proprietary step across the threshold, into his foyer. "We live here now." The phrase hung in the air, a declaration of war, disguised as a statement of fact. For a moment, Jamari couldn't process it. His brain stuttered, trying to reconcile the woman standing in his hall with the words she had just spoken. He looked past her, at Kiara, who was now walking up the path, her $800 Gucci handbag swinging from her arm. She had a placid, almost beatific smile on her face, as if this was the most natural thing in the world, as if they had all planned this together. He had no idea how wrong he was. But the seeds of this disastrous morning had been planted months ago, in the fertile soil of his own love and trust. Their life together, up until that moment, had been a carefully constructed facade of domestic normalcy. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown, the $2,800 monthly rent a comfortable expense on his salary, Jamari's life was ordered and disciplined. His days were spent in the quiet, sterile labs of the CDC campus on Clifton Road, his mind occupied with viral mutation rates and population-level health outcomes. He drove a 10-year-old Toyota Camry with 187,000 miles on it, a testament to his belief in practicality over flash. His one indulgence was his library of scientific books, a collection worth well over $15,000. Kiara was his opposite. She was vibrant, social, and loved the finer things. She worked in marketing for a boutique firm, earning around $65,000 a year, but her spending often suggested a much higher income. There was the constant rotation of new outfits, like the $600 Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress she'd bought for a friend's wedding, or the weekly dinners at expensive Buckhead restaurants that could easily top $300 a meal. Jamari, besotted, saw it as her enjoying life. He paid the lion's share of their expenses without complaint, transferring $2,000 into their joint account every month like clockwork to cover rent and utilities, while his own savings grew steadily in a separate account, the one funding his dream. Her family was a constant presence. Cordelia and Winston lived in a cramped, 3-bedroom apartment in Sandy Springs, a space they also shared with Malachi. The apartment, with its peeling paint and aging appliances, was a source of constant complaint. "This place is just falling apart," Cordelia would sigh during their Sunday dinners, which were always hosted and paid for by Jamari. "The landlord won't fix the dishwasher. It's a cheap $300 model anyway, and my knees just can't take washing all these dishes by hand anymore." Winston would just nod, staring into his plate while Malachi would chime in. "Yeah, and the Wi-Fi sucks. How am I supposed to apply for jobs with garbage internet?" Malachi had been applying for jobs for 3 years, a performance that seemed to involve little more than playing video games on a $2,000 gaming rig Jamari had watched Kiara buy for him last Christmas. Jamari, raised by a single mother who had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, felt a pang of sympathy. He wanted to help. He wanted to be a good husband and son-in-law. When Cordelia's car, a 15-year-old Ford Focus, finally gave out, he co-signed a loan for a $28,000 Kia Sorento for her. He told himself it was for Kiara's peace of mind. "Thank you, baby," Kiara had said, kissing him. "You don't know how much this means to Mama. She was so stressed." The dream of the house in Ansley Park was Jamari's alone, at first. It was a secret ambition he'd nurtured for years. He loved the neighborhood's old-world charm, the proximity to Piedmont Park, the feeling of permanence. He'd been saving for the down payment since he was a resident, socking away bonuses and living frugally. The money, over $400,000, sat in a brokerage account tied to the same premarital trust that held all his other significant assets, a legal firewall his lawyer had insisted upon when he'd first started earning a serious salary. Jamari, his lawyer, a sharp woman named Aaliyah, had told him, "Love is beautiful, but a trust is forever. You protect what you built before you say, 'I do.'" When he finally told Kiara he had enough and was ready to buy, her reaction was ecstatic, but in a way that felt subtly wrong in retrospect. She wasn't excited about building a home with him. She was excited about the house itself. "Oh my God, Jamari, Ansley Park?" She'd squealed, pulling up listings on her $1,200 iPhone. "Do you know who lives there? The houses are huge. We could have so much space." They went to see the house on the Prado one Sunday afternoon. It was a 1920s brick colonial, lovingly maintained, with a sprawling garden and a detached carriage house. It was listed at $1.9 million. As they walked through the echoing, empty rooms, Jamari pictured a quiet study, a room for a future child, a breakfast nook where he and Kiara could drink coffee. Kiara saw something else entirely. "This room would be perfect for my mother," she said, standing in one of the upstairs bedrooms. "It gets the morning light she likes." Jamari laughed, thinking she was joking. "She can have it when she visits." Kiara didn't laugh back. She just gave him a tight, unreadable smile. "Of course, when she visits." A week later, Kiara brought her family to see the house before he'd even made an offer. Jamari felt a prickle of annoyance, but he smoothed it over. He wanted them to be happy, for him, for them. Cordelia walked through the house like a building inspector, pointing out flaws. "This kitchen will need a complete remodel. These are probably $20,000 countertops, but they're dated. We'll need a sub-zero fridge. That's another $15,000 right there." Malachi immediately claimed the carriage house. "Yo, this would be a sick man cave. I could put my whole setup in here. Private entrance and everything." Jamari felt a growing unease. "It's a guest space, Malachi," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Yeah, a permanent guest space," Malachi muttered, just loud enough for Jamari to hear. That night, Jamari tried to talk to Kiara about it. "Babe, your family seems to think they're all moving in with us." Kiara rolled her eyes, her tone instantly dismissive. "Oh, Jamari, don't be so dramatic. They're just excited for us. You know how they are. They've had it so tough in that tiny apartment. Can't you just be happy that we'll have enough space to help them out?" "Help them out is one thing, Kiara. Having them move in is another. This is our home. For us." "And they are my family," she snapped, her voice rising. "Are you saying my family isn't welcome?" The accusation, a classic manipulation he was only now beginning to recognize, silenced him. He backed down, telling himself he was overthinking it. He was letting his own solitary nature get the best of him. He was a black man who had achieved a level of success few in his family had ever seen. The least he could do was be generous. It was a critical mistake. The cruelty became more casual, more frequent in the weeks that followed. The offer on the house was accepted at $1.8 million, and the closing date was set. Kiara's excitement became a frantic, almost manic energy. She wasn't focused on paint colors or furniture for them. She was creating floor plans for her family. One evening, he found her on her laptop, using a design app. "What are you up to?" he asked, leaning over her shoulder. On the screen was a layout of the Ansley Park house. The master bedroom was labeled Jamari and Kiara. The second largest bedroom was labeled Mama and Daddy. The third was empty. The carriage house was labeled Malachi. "Kiara, what is this?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. She slammed the laptop shut, a flash of guilt and anger on her face. "It's nothing. Just an idea. I was just playing around, seeing how much space we have. You're so sensitive about everything. It looked like you were assigning rooms to your entire family." "So what if I was?" she retorted, standing up. "Is it a crime to dream? To want my family to be comfortable and safe for once in their lives? After everything you have, you can't even spare a little space for them in your head? God, sometimes I don't even know who you are, Jamari. You're so selfish." She stormed out of the room, leaving him standing by the couch, the word selfish echoing in his ears. He who paid for everything, he who co-signed the car loan, he who was about to sink his entire life savings into a home he thought was for them. The accusation was so outrageous, so disconnected from reality, that he simply couldn't process it. Instead of seeing the glaring crimson red flag for what it was, he saw it as a symptom of her stress. He told himself she was just worried about her family and lashing out. He resolved to be more understanding. The week of the closing, Kiara was strangely distant. On Monday, he tried to talk to her about their moving schedule. "So, I was thinking we can have the painters come in next week, and then we can get the movers scheduled for the weekend after that." "Whatever you think is best, honey," she'd said, barely looking up from her phone, scrolling through what looked like the West Elm website. He saw her adding a $3,000 sectional sofa to a shopping cart. He assumed it was for their new living room. On Wednesday, the day of the closing, he sat in the lawyer's office on Peachtree Street, a glass tower that reflected the endless Atlanta sky. The room was cold, the air thick with the smell of paper and money. He signed document after document, his hand cramping. The final wire transfer of $427,812.54 for the down payment and closing costs left his account. A wave of nausea and elation washed over him. He owned it. It was his. He sent Kiara a text. "It's done. We own a house. Call you in a bit. Love you." Her reply, which came 20 minutes later, was a single, lukewarm sentence. "Great news. Talk soon." He'd felt a pang of disappointment. He had just made the single largest purchase of his life, solidifying their future, and her response was, "That?" He called her, but it went straight to voicemail. He told himself she was just busy at work. He went to the house alone, the new keys feeling heavy and real in his hand. He walked through the empty rooms, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos in his heart. He had no idea that at that very moment, Kiara was on a conference call with her mother and brother, finalizing the logistics of their own move-in day. They had already rented the U-Haul. They had already packed their boxes. They had no idea what was coming. And now, here they were, standing in his foyer. Cordelia's words, "We live here now," were not a question. They were a decree. Jamari's mind, trained to see patterns and trace origins, was working at lightning speed. Every dismissive comment from Kiara, every entitled joke from Malachi, every sighing complaint from Cordelia, it was all data. And the data was suddenly forming a terrifying, undeniable conclusion. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a coup. A premeditated, coordinated takeover of his life and his property. He looked at Kiara, who was finally standing beside her mother. She refused to meet his eyes. Instead, she looked around the foyer, at the grand staircase, her expression one of pure, unadulterated triumph. "Isn't it beautiful, Mama?" Kiara said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I told you it was perfect for us." The word "us" was a physical blow. Jamari felt the air leave his lungs. The warmth he had felt for this woman, the love he thought they shared, evaporated in an instant, replaced by a chilling, crystalline clarity. He felt nothing. The emotional part of his brain simply shut down, and the logical, methodical epidemiologist took over. This was not a domestic dispute. This was a contamination event. The pathogen was entitlement. The vector was his wife. And the only solution was quarantine and decontamination. Winston and Malachi were already at the back of the U-Haul, unlatching the heavy door. He could see boxes inside, dozens of them, packed to the brim. On the side of one, written in thick black marker, he could read the words, "Mama's Kitchen, good plates." Jamari took a single, deliberate step back, out of the foyer and onto his own porch. He closed the heavy oak door softly, leaving them inside his house. The click of the latch was deafeningly final. Through the beveled glass window in the door, he could see their confused faces. Cordelia's mouth opened, likely to shout at him, but he was already turning away. He walked calmly down his front steps, past the perfectly manicured lawn that his $150 a month landscaping service had tended just yesterday. He walked past Winston and Malachi, who paused with a box of what looked like old towels, their expressions shifting from exertion to confusion. He didn't say a word to them. He walked to the edge of his property line, stood on the public sidewalk, and pulled his $1,200 iPhone from his pocket. Inside the house, he could hear Cordelia's muffled shout, "Jamari! What do you think you're doing? Open this door!" He ignored her. His fingers were steady as he dialed. First, he called his lawyer, Aaliyah. It was a Saturday, but he knew she'd pick up. She always did. Aaliyah, he said, his voice even and low. It's Jamari. We have a situation at the Ansley Park house. He explained what had happened in fewer than 100 words, the U-Haul, the family, the declaration. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, Aaliyah's voice, sharp and focused. Jamari, do not engage with them. Do not argue. Do you have the closing portfolio I gave you on Wednesday? It's in my briefcase, inside the house. Okay, your next call is to the Atlanta Police Department. Non-emergency line. Tell them there are unknown individuals who have entered your property without permission and are refusing to leave. Use the word trespassing. Tell them you are the sole owner and you are standing outside. Do you understand? I understand, Jamari said. Good. I'm on my way. I'm about 20 minutes out. Do not speak to Kiara or her family until I get there, or until the police arrive. Let the authorities handle it. You are a scientist. Be a scientist. Observe. Document. Do not interact with the specimen. The analogy was grim, but it centered him. Okay, he said, and hung up. His next call was to the APD. He gave the dispatcher his address and a calm, factual account of the situation. He emphasized that he was outside, that he was not in immediate danger, but that there were several people in his home who he needed removed. The dispatcher told him a car would be dispatched shortly. He put his phone back in his pocket and waited. He stood on the sidewalk, a solitary, unmoving figure. From across the street, a neighbor watering her prize-winning azaleas, worth hundreds in competition entry fees, watched with undisguised curiosity. Jamari gave her a polite, tight-lipped nod. The front door of his house flew open. Kiara ran out, her face a mask of fury. Jamari, what the hell is wrong with you? My mother is having a fit. You locked us in. Jamari looked at her. He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were looking at a stranger. The woman he had loved, the woman he had married, was gone. In her place was this grasping, entitled person he didn't recognize. The door was unlocked, Kiara, he said, his voice flat. You just had to turn the knob. That's not the point. Why did you walk out? Why are you being so weird? We're here. We're moving in. This is supposed to be a happy day. Was I included in the planning for this happy day? He asked, the question hanging in the air like a particle of dust in a sunbeam. What are you talking about? Of course you were. We're a family. We are not a family, Jamari said, the words tasting like metal. You and I are a marriage. Or we were. Your parents and your brother are your family. They do not live here. Malachi and Winston had dropped the box and were now walking toward him, Malachi with a belligerent look on his face. Cordelia appeared in the doorway behind Kiara, her arms crossed, her expression thunderous. What is this nonsense, Jamari? Cordelia boomed. After everything we've done for you, welcoming you into our family, this is how you treat us? We are in a bind. We had to be out of our apartment by the end of the month. Kiara told us you understood. She told us you wanted to help. Jamari's gaze shifted to his wife. Is that what you told them, Kiara? That I agreed to have your entire family move into my house? Kiara faltered for a second, her bravado cracking. I told them you were a good man. I told them you'd want to do the right thing. The right thing for who, Kiara? For you? For them? Malachi stepped forward, puffing out his chest. Yo, man, what's your problem? We're family. You got this huge house? We just need a little help getting on our feet. Jamari looked at the 26-year-old man who had never held a job for more than 6 months. You've needed help getting on your feet for your entire adult life, Malachi. Your feet are just fine. It's your hands that don't seem to work. The insult landed, Malachi's face darkened. You think you're better than us with your fancy CDC job and your big words? Before Jamari could respond, a black and white Atlanta PD cruiser turned onto the street, its progress slow and deliberate. It pulled up to the curb behind Winston's Accord. The flashing lights were silent, but their effect was instantaneous. The entire family froze. 2 officers got out. One was a tall, broad-shouldered white man, the other a shorter, powerfully built black woman. Their expressions were neutral, professional. The woman, Officer Ross, spoke first. We got a call about a trespassing issue at this address? Jamari stepped forward, away from the knot of Kiara's family. Yes, officer, I'm Jamari Williams. I am the owner of this property. These individuals have entered my home without my consent and are refusing to leave. Cordelia gasped, a theatrical, wounded sound. That is a lie. This is our son-in-law. This is our daughter. We're moving in. Officer Ross looked from Jamari to Cordelia, then to Kiara. Ma'am, is this your husband? She asked Kiara. Yes, Kiara said, rushing forward. This is my husband, Jamari. He's just having a bad day. He's stressed from the move. I am not stressed, Jamari said, his voice cutting through her excuses. I am the sole owner of this property. It was purchased with my personal funds and is held in a private trust that predates my marriage to this woman. Her name is not on the deed. Her name is not on the mortgage. She has no legal right to this house, and neither does her family. I have asked them to leave, and they have refused. They are trespassing. The air crackled with tension. Kiara's face went white. She stared at Jamari as if she'd never seen him before. The confidence she'd worn like a cloak just moments ago was gone, replaced by a dawning horror. She had made a critical mistake. She had assumed his quiet nature was weakness. She had mistaken his generosity for foolishness. That's not true, Kiara stammered. We're married. What's his is mine. That's how it works. That is not how it works, a new voice said. Aaliyah, Jamari's lawyer, had arrived. She pulled her white $85,000 Mercedes E-Class sedan to the curb and got out, holding a slim leather briefcase. She was wearing an $8,700 Armani suit, and she radiated an aura of expensive, lethal competence. She walked directly to Jamari's side and addressed the officers. Officers, I am Aaliyah James, Mr. Williams' attorney. He is correct. I have a copy of the deed right here, along with the trust documentation. The property at 1258 Prado is owned exclusively by the Williams Family Trust, of which Jamari Williams is the sole trustee and beneficiary. Miss Kiara Johnson, she said, using Kiara's maiden name with deliberate precision, has no legal claim to this property. Aaliyah opened her briefcase and produced a thick folder. She handed a document to Officer Ross. It was the deed, clean, official, and undeniable. Officer Ross scanned the document. She looked at her partner. He nodded. She then turned her attention back to Kiara and her family. Her voice was no longer neutral. It was firm. Ma'am, she said to Cordelia, you and your family need to collect your belongings from inside the house and leave the property. Cordelia's face contorted with rage. You can't be serious. This is a family matter. You have no right. Actually, ma'am, I do, Officer Ross said, her patience clearly wearing thin. This is a simple trespassing call. This man, she gestured to Jamari, owns this house. You do not. You are on his property against his wishes. If you do not leave, I will be forced to arrest you. The threat of arrest finally pierced their bubble of entitlement. Winston's face went slack with fear. Malachi, who had been posturing just minutes before, suddenly looked like a scared child. Cordelia's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The full weight of their miscalculation fell on Kiara. her eyes wide with panic, darted between Jamari, the police officers, and her lawyer. She took a step toward Jamari, her hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "Jamari, baby, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Don't do this. We can talk about this. It was a mistake. I was just trying to help my family. Please don't do this to me. To us." Jamari looked at her, at the woman who had planned to colonize his life, who had lied to him for months, who had stood by and smiled, while her mother declared ownership of his home. He felt a profound and desolate emptiness. The love was a ghost, a memory of a feeling. He took the house keys from his pocket. He held them up for her to see. "There is no us anymore, Kiara," he said, his voice quiet but devastatingly final. "Get your things out of my house." He then turned to the officers. "I would like them to remove their possessions from the U-Haul and leave it empty. I will be dealing with the rental company myself." The officers nodded. The strike was complete. It was time for the fallout. The hour that followed was one of the most excruciatingly satisfying of Jamari's life. Under the watchful eyes of 2 Atlanta police officers, Kiara and her family were forced to unpack their lives onto the pristine sidewalk of Ansley Park. It was a public shaming conducted in near silence. The boxes they had so triumphantly loaded were now symbols of their failed heist. Mama's kitchen, good plates, was stacked next to Malachi's games, a pathetic monument to their greed. Cordelia, stripped of her authority, directed the unloading with bitter, muttered commands. Winston, his face a mask of weary resignation, did the heavy lifting, his movements slow and defeated. Malachi worked with a sullen, resentful anger, slamming boxes down with just enough force to show his displeasure, but not enough to draw the attention of the police. Kiara did not help. She stood apart, near the crookedly parked Honda Accord, her arms wrapped around herself. She alternated between staring at Jamari with tear-filled, pleading eyes and glaring at the U-Haul with pure hatred. She had tried to speak to him once more, a whispered, "Jamari, we can fix this." But Aaliyah had stepped in front of her like a shield. "My client has nothing further to say to you, Miss Johnson," Aaliyah had said, her voice like ice. "Any future communication will be through me." Jamari watched the entire spectacle from his front porch, seated in a single patio chair he had unpacked the day before. He drank a bottle of water, his posture calm, his expression unreadable. He was the scientist observing the results of a successful experiment. The contaminant was being purged. At 10:42 a.m., the U-Haul was empty. The family's possessions, a motley collection of worn furniture, cheap electronics, and overflowing bags of clothes, were piled on the grass verge next to their car, a mess of dashed hopes. It was clear they could not fit it all into the small Accord. "What are we supposed to do with all this?" Cordelia demanded of Officer Ross, gesturing wildly at the pile. "That's not our concern, ma'am," the officer replied coolly. "You just have to be off this property." In the end, they crammed what they could into the car. Malachi and Winston had to tie a lumpy mattress to the roof with bungee cords. They left behind a stained armchair, a wobbly bookshelf, and half a dozen boxes, a monument to their failure. As they squeezed into the car, Cordelia, Winston, and Malachi in the back, Kiara in the front, Jamari felt a final, fleeting pang of something that might have been pity, but it was quickly replaced by a profound sense of relief. As the overstuffed Honda Accord sputtered to life and drove away, disappearing down the tree-lined street, a quiet fell. Aaliyah turned to him. "Are you okay?" "I will be," Jamari said. He looked at the abandoned U-Haul, the key still in the ignition. "What do we do about that?" "I've already called the U-Haul on Peachtree," Aaliyah said, already on her phone. "They're sending a driver to pick it up. I've paid the extra fee on your card. Consider it a $250 parting gift. The next day, Sunday, was a day of strategic action. Jamari awoke at 6 a.m. on his air mattress. For the first time, the house did not feel empty. It felt peaceful. It felt his. At 8 a.m. sharp, a locksmith arrived. The company, Atlanta Lock and Key, charged a $450 fee to change every external lock on the property, including the carriage house. Jamari watched as the old locks, the ones Kiara had a key for, were removed and replaced with new, high-security hardware. He held the new set of keys in his hand. They felt like sovereignty. At 9:30 a.m., he sat down at his temporary folding table with his laptop and a fresh cup of coffee. Aaliyah had already emailed him the divorce filing documents. He spent the next hour meticulously compiling evidence. He went through months of text messages. There was the one from Kiara 2 months ago. Mama's landlord is raising the rent again. It's criminal. I wish we could do something. And his reply? I'm sorry to hear that, babe. We can help them out with a bit of cash if they need it. There was another from 6 weeks ago after they saw the house. Malachi is so excited about the carriage house. He's already planning his setup. His reply, it's a guest space, Kiara. We've talked about this. He screenshotted every message, every dismissive reply, every manipulative accusation of him being selfish. He attached the photos he had discreetly taken yesterday of the boxes, the ones labeled with his in-laws' names. He wrote a detailed 2-page declaration, his prose as precise and factual as a scientific paper, outlining the events of the past few months, culminating in the attempted takeover of his home. Every lie was now a piece of evidence. Each scene of her cruelty was now a paragraph in a legal document. At 11:15 a.m., he logged into the Fulton County Court's e-filing portal. With Aaliyah on the phone guiding him through the process, he formally filed for divorce from Kiara Johnson, citing irreconcilable differences. The filing fee was $214. It was the best money he had ever spent. The consequences for Kiara and her family began to cascade almost immediately. The first volley was a series of voicemails that began that Sunday afternoon. Jamari didn't answer her calls, letting them all go to the answering service Aaliyah had set up. He listened to them later as dispassionate records of a collapse. Voicemail 1, Sunday, 2:15 p.m. Confused anger. Jamari, pick up the phone. You can't be serious about this. You're going to throw away our marriage over a misunderstanding? My mother is a mess. Call me back, now. Voicemail 2, Sunday 5:40 p.m. pleading. Baby, please. I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. I handled it all wrong. I should have talked to you. But my family? They were just so desperate. I thought you'd understand. We can still fix this. I love you. Voicemail 3, Monday 9 a.m. Horror. I just got an email from a lawyer. Divorce papers? Jamari, are you insane? You're divorcing me? Over this? After everything? You can't do this. Voicemail 4, Monday 11:23 a.m. Threats. You think you can just throw me out with nothing? I'm your wife. I'll see you in court, Jamari. I'll take you for everything you have. That house is half mine. You'll see. You will regret this. But her threats were empty. Aaliyah had already filed a motion to enforce the premarital trust agreement. Kiara had signed it before their wedding, a standard document she had dismissed at the time as a mere formality. Now it was an iron wall around Jamari's assets. The $1.8 million house was untouchable. His CDC pension, valued at over $300,000, was untouchable. His $401,000 in personal investments, totaling another $650,000, were all untouchable. The legal battle was short and brutal. Kiara hired a cheap lawyer who tried to argue that the trust was invalid, that she had been coerced. But Aaliyah, billing at a formidable $1,200 per hour, dismantled their case with ruthless efficiency. The text messages were produced. The photos of the moving boxes were entered as evidence. Jamari's calm, factual declaration was read aloud in a deposition. The judge threw out Kiara's claim. The divorce was finalized in 4 months. The final decree was a masterpiece of legal devastation. Kiara was awarded no alimony. She was not entitled to any portion of the Ansley Park house or Jamari's retirement assets. The only shared property was the contents of their old Midtown apartment and the balance of their joint checking account, which, after Kiara's spending, contained a paltry $1,287. She was also made solely responsible for the $18,000 in credit card debt she had amassed in her own name. Her downfall was swift and complete. Fired from her marketing job for taking too many personal calls and missing deadlines during the divorce proceedings, she was forced to move back into her parents' cramped apartment in Sandy Springs. She was back in the very place she had schemed so desperately to escape. Only now she was a 36-year-old divorcee with no job, significant debt, and the public humiliation of her failed plot hanging over her. Cordelia and Winston's lives were diminished as well. The story of their attempted takeover, embellished by the nosy neighbor, spread through their church and community like wildfire. They were seen for what they were, grasping and entitled. The whispers followed them everywhere. They had to sell the Kia Sorento that Jamari had co-signed for just to cover their own mounting bills, taking a $6,000 loss on the sale. Malachi, stripped of his prospective man cave and the financial support he'd expected from his successful brother-in-law, grew more sullen and resentful. Without Jamari's influence, he was just another unemployed man living with his parents, his dreams of a high-tech gaming sanctuary replaced by the reality of his mother's failing dishwasher. Their collective greed had cost them everything, most notably their dignity. 2 years later, the house on the Prado was no longer just a house. It was a home. The silence that had once felt lonely now felt like peace. The rooms were filled not with the ghosts of entitlement, but with light books and the quiet hum of a life well lived. Jamari had turned the would-be mama and daddy's room into a magnificent home office and library. His collection of medical journals and scientific texts lined custom-built shelves that cost a cool $12,000, a worthy investment in his own intellect. The carriage house, once coveted by Malachi, was now a fully furnished guest suite, but its guests were carefully chosen. He had started a mentorship program. Once a month, he hosted 2 promising young black epidemiology students from Emory University's public health school. He would spend a Saturday afternoon with them in his garden, which was now a lush and thriving oasis of gardenias and hydrangeas, a testament to growth. They would talk about biostatistics and career paths, about the unique challenges and opportunities they faced. He'd buy them lunch, usually from a local black-owned restaurant, a simple $50 gesture that felt more meaningful than any lavish dinner in Buckhead ever had. He saw the same drive in their eyes that he'd had at their age. He was helping to build something that mattered. His days settled into a comfortable, fulfilling rhythm. His work at the CDC was more rewarding than ever. He was leading a new division focused on global health preparedness, a position that came with a raise to $155,000. In the evenings, he would often go for long walks. He'd leave his quiet street, his anachronistic $89 Timex on his wrist, and head toward Piedmont Park. He'd walk the familiar paths, watching families fly kites, couples holding hands, the whole vibrant tapestry of Atlanta life unfolding around him. The setting sun would cast long shadows from the glass towers of Midtown, towers that no longer represented emotional distance, but simply a city he was a part of, on his own terms. The sunlight, warm on his deep brown skin, felt like healing. He never saw Kiara or her family again. Aaliyah handled the final, sterile transactions of the divorce. He heard through a mutual acquaintance that Kiara had moved to another state, trying for a fresh start. He hoped she found it. He had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his. Forgiveness was the final act of decontamination, the closing of a door so that new ones could open. He held no anger, only a quiet, profound gratitude for the lesson. One evening, sitting on a bench overlooking the park's lake as the first stars began to appear, he reflected on the whole affair. The outrage had faded, the pain had subsided, and what remained was a simple, unshakable truth. He thought he had been buying a house, a status symbol, a container for a life. He was wrong. A home is not a collection of rooms and expensive appliances. It is not a bargaining chip to be used, or a prize to be won. True wealth isn't a $1.8 million property deed or a six-figure salary. True wealth is peace of mind. It's the integrity of your own space. It's the freedom to choose who you allow to cross your threshold. It is the quiet, unassailable knowledge that the only person you ever truly need to build a life for is yourself. And from that foundation, all other good things can grow. The experience was devastating, but it taught him a lesson he wouldn't trade for anything. Have you ever had a moment of shocking clarity where you suddenly saw someone for who they truly were? Let us know in the comments below. Jamari took a deep breath of the cool night air, stood up, and began the walk home. He had work to do in the morning. He had students to mentor. He had a garden to tend. He had a life to live, a life that was, finally and completely, his own.